2:07 a.m., April 3, 2026, East Nashville, Tennessee. 41 federal agents moved through 3 separate staging points within a 2-block radius of Meridian Sound studios on Gallatin Avenue. DEA vehicles idled without headlights. ATF tactical teams held position in an alley behind the building's service entrance. Metro Nashville SWAT had the front covered. Estimated street value of product inside, $38 million. The building looked like every other mid-tier recording studio in East Nashville. Exposed brick. A hand-painted logo above the door. Instagram-worthy interior visible through the front glass. On a good week, legitimate artists came and went at all hours. No one looked twice at the late-night traffic. That was the point. Behind the soundproofed mixing room on the 2nd floor wasn't a recording booth. It was a fully operational pharmaceutical press capable of producing 400,000 fentanyl pills per week. The network supplying it, moving it, and protecting it had been running undetected for nearly 10 months. 14 people would be in custody before sunrise, across 3 states. This is how it started, and this is how it ended. The name on the lease was Meridian Sound Group, LLC, registered in Tennessee in February 2024, listed business purpose, music production, audio engineering, artist management. The studio had a Spotify presence. Real artists had recorded there. A producer named Darius Wynn had legitimate credits on 2 regional hip-hop albums released in 2025. His Instagram showed session photos, equipment reels, artist shout-outs, 180,000 followers, verified account. Everything about Meridian Sound looked real because parts of it were real. That was the design. The investigation that eventually brought 41 agents to Gallatin Avenue didn't start in Nashville. It didn't start with DEA. It started in Memphis 7 months earlier with a postal inspector named Calvin Marsh working a routine freight anomaly review at the Memphis Processing and Distribution Center, September 4, 2025. A manifest for a shipment labeled audio cable sets, commercial grade, declared a total weight of 6, 2 pounds across 3 packages. Declared destination, 3 music venues in the Memphis metro area. Actual weight logged at intake, 14, 7 pounds. The discrepancy was 8, 5 pounds. That kind of gap doesn't happen by accident with cable bundles. Cables are dense, uniform, predictable. Marsh flagged the manifest. He cross-referenced the return address against the Tennessee Business Registry. Meridian Sound Group, LLC, Nashville. He forwarded the anomaly report to the DEA Nashville field office with a 1-paragraph summary, weight inconsistency, music industry cover, repeat shipper pattern across a 6-week window. 3 prior shipments to the same venues, same declared contents, similar weight gaps. DEA Supervisory Special Agent Renata Holloway received the memo on September 8th. She assigned it to a 2-agent preliminary review team. What they found over the next 2 weeks was enough to open a formal Title III investigation. The wiretap authorization covered 14 phones. 6 encrypted signal accounts were flagged for metadata analysis, though Signal's architecture limited what could be extracted directly. Over the following 4 months, agents logged 2,200 hours of intercepts. What emerged wasn't a simple drug shipment operation. It was a distribution structure that used the music industry as cover for moving product across a 3-state corridor. The logic was straightforward, and it had been working. Music industry logistics involve constant equipment shipments between cities. Amplifiers, mixing boards, instrument cases, cable reels, acoustic materials. Couriers move this equipment regularly without drawing attention because the industry normalizes late-night transit, irregular scheduling, and cash-adjacent payments. A van moving from Nashville to Memphis at 2 a.m. for a show load-in is not unusual. No one stops it. Meridian Sound had built a courier network using 12 individuals who were, in most cases, genuinely connected to the music industry. Some drove tour support vehicles. Others worked as equipment rental handlers. 2 were sound engineers who took regional gigs. They moved product in modified equipment cases, in sealed acoustic foam rolls, and in one documented instance, inside a road case for a drum kit that was never actually used for a show. The product traveled to Memphis, Louisville, and Atlanta. In each city, a regional distributor received the shipment through a contact in the local music scene. From there, it moved into street-level distribution through networks with no visible connection to Nashville or to Meridian Sound. I went through the intercept summaries from this case, and one detail kept coming back. The couriers almost never discussed the product directly. Conversations were structured around logistics, pickup times, route confirmations, equipment inventory checks. To anyone listening without context, it sounded like a touring company scheduling a regional run. The DEA's signals team had to build a lexicon of coded references over 6 weeks before they could reliably identify which conversations were about drugs and which were actually about music equipment. That's a level of operational security that takes planning and time. The network had been running in this configuration since at least June 2025, based on the earliest shipment records agents could tie to Meridian Sound with confidence. By the time the wiretap was authorized, the operation had been going for at least 14 months without generating a single law enforcement referral beyond Marsh's initial manifest flag. ATF's involvement began separately. In late October 2025, ballistic evidence from an armed robbery in Clarksville, Tennessee was matched to a firearm recovered in a Nashville traffic stop. The weapon's serial number traced back to a purchase by a man named Terrence Alt. Alt was listed as a security contractor for Meridian Sound Group. ATF opened a parallel inquiry. By November, investigators on both sides had identified an overlap in their subject lists. A joint coordination meeting in Nashville resulted in a combined task force, with Metro Nashville SWAT designated for tactical support on any eventual entry operation. The first major obstacle emerged in December 2025. 3 weeks into the combined surveillance phase, the primary wiretap on the lead distributor's phone went dark. The target had switched devices. The DEA technical operations team traced the new number within 72 hours, but the gap created a blind spot during what turned out to be a significant product delivery. Agents had no audio coverage of the transaction and had to reconstruct it through physical surveillance and financial pattern analysis. The solution was to expand the monitoring apparatus rather than wait for another gap. Agents added 2 more phones to the active wire and positioned additional physical surveillance assets at 3 locations tied to Meridian Sound's courier network. The expanded coverage cost 4 additional weeks of setup, but it closed the vulnerability. By late January 2026, agents had mapped a 31-person distribution chain. The structure ran from a supply-side contact in the southwest United States who provided the fentanyl powder to a Nashville-based processing operation through the Meridian Sound courier network to regional distributors in 3 states, and then outward into street-level supply chains. The investigation had started with a weight discrepancy in 3 audio cable packages. It had grown into one of the larger fentanyl distribution networks identified in the Mid-South region in the past 3 years. Here's the piece that still doesn't sit easily: the supply side. Investigators traced the fentanyl powder to a distribution point in the Southwest, but the ultimate source of the chemical precursors remains a documented gap in the public record. The charges cover the Nashville processing node and the distribution network. What's upstream of that is either still under investigation or hasn't been publicly disclosed. The network was bigger than what was dismantled on April 3rd. The question is, how much bigger? The processing facility had been built carefully. The second floor of Meridian Sound contained a standard recording studio layout: soundproofed walls, mixing console, vocal booth, production equipment. Behind the mixing room, accessed through a reinforced door designed to look like an equipment closet, was a converted pill pressing operation, a hydraulic press. Ventilation ductwork installed at custom angles to direct chemical odors away from the main studio space and into an exhaust channel venting through the building's HVAC system. Raw fentanyl powder stored in sealed containers behind acoustic foam panels that had been cut and re-adhered to allow access. What's most striking about this case isn't the scale, it's the detail of the concealment. The ventilation system was designed by someone with knowledge of both building systems and chemical detection. That kind of HVAC modification isn't improvised. It requires planning, materials, and someone who knows what they're doing. The ATF investigation into who designed and installed it is listed as ongoing in the charging documents. The decision to execute the raid on April 3rd was driven by a combination of factors. Intelligence indicated that a significant product transfer was scheduled for the following week. There was also growing concern that one of the lower-level couriers had become suspicious of increased surveillance activity in the days prior. The Joint Task Force determined that moving earlier was preferable to risking operational exposure. At 11:47 p.m. on April 2nd, the final operational briefing was held at a DEA field office in the Nashville metro area. 41 agents reviewed assignments. Entry teams were organized into 3 elements: the primary breach team targeting the studio's front entrance, a secondary team covering the service entrance on the building's east side, and a tactical containment element positioned to prevent egress from the second-floor windows. The second obstacle came at the briefing itself. Updated building schematics pulled from city records 20 minutes before the briefing showed a discrepancy from the floor plan agents had been working with. A wall partition on the second floor had been altered at some point since the last permitted renovation filing. The breach team leader had to adjust entry sequencing on the fly, redistributing team positions to account for the revised interior layout. 12 minutes of the briefing were absorbed by that adjustment. The plan held. Teams moved into position at 1:52 a.m. Put yourself in the position of the breach team leader for a moment. 2 a.m. in East Nashville. You have the corrected floor plan in hand. You know there's a hydraulic press behind a reinforced door on the second floor. You know there are potentially armed individuals inside. The building has a front entrance that opens to a visible street. And you have 12 agents stacked outside, waiting for the signal. At 2:07 a.m., the entry signal was given. The front door was breached in under 10 seconds. The ATF team hit the service entrance simultaneously. Metro SWAT established the perimeter. 3 individuals on the first floor were taken into custody without resistance within the first 90 seconds. 2 were in the main studio area. 1 was in the front office. The second floor took longer. The reinforced door behind the mixing room was locked from inside. The breach team used mechanical entry. The door gave way on the second attempt. Inside the mixing room, 2 individuals. Neither resisted. Behind the equipment closet door, the lab, agents documented what they found over the next 4 hours: 38 kilograms of fentanyl powder, a hydraulic pill press, industrial grade, capable of producing tablets at the rate consistent with the 400,000 per week estimate in the warrant application. $4.2 million in United States currency, vacuum sealed in plastic and stored in acoustic drum canisters behind the foam panel installation. The ventilation system, which agents photographed and had analyzed by an ATF structural specialist on scene. Pill binding agents. Counterfeit pharmaceutical dye compounds to match the appearance of legitimate prescription medications. The cache alone took 3 evidence technicians nearly 2 hours to document, photograph, and inventory. Simultaneous operations ran across 3 states during the same 2-hour window. In Memphis, 4 individuals were taken into custody at a residence and at a commercial music venue used as a distribution point. In Louisville, 3 arrests were made at 2 separate locations. In Atlanta, 2 additional subjects were arrested. 14 people were in custody by 6 a.m. The studio's Spotify-listed producer, Darius Wynn, was not at Meridian Sound when the raid executed. He had left Nashville the previous day on what was logged in text intercepts as a tour logistics run. He was located at a truck stop outside Birmingham, Alabama, and taken into custody at 5:17 a.m. by agents from DEA's Birmingham field office. He was transported back to Nashville for initial processing. 1 subject was not located. An individual identified in the charging documents under a coded reference, tied to the supply-side connection in the Southwest, had not been in contact with the Nashville operation for 11 days prior to the raid. The last known location was a cell tower ping in a different state. As of the public filing date, that individual's whereabouts remained unknown. The indictment returned against the 14 arrested individuals covers drug distribution, conspiracy, manufacturing of a controlled substance, money laundering, and weapons charges. The weapons charges stem from the ATF component of the investigation and the ballistic evidence originating in the Clarksville robbery case. Darius Wynn faces the full range of charges as the alleged primary organizer of the Nashville side operation. Sentencing guidelines for the lead charges at the federal level run into decades. Several of the lower-level couriers have indicated through counsel an interest in cooperation agreements. Whether those agreements produce additional indictments further up the supply chain is a question that remains unanswered in the public record. Here's a take that will probably generate some disagreement. The Meridian Sound operation ran for at least 14 months. During that time, it shipped product through postal infrastructure that was flagged only because one inspector in Memphis noticed a weight discrepancy on a routine manifest. There was no proactive detection from DEA, no intelligence-led interdiction. A postal inspector doing his job created the entire case. That's worth sitting with. How many operations like this one are running right now because no one happened to check the weight of an audio cable shipment? What do you think? Was the system working here, or did the postal inspector's catch expose a gap that the federal framework should have caught on its own? That's a real question with real implications for how these networks keep operating. The most discussed aspect of the case in law enforcement circles, based on public statements from officials involved, is the ventilation system. The chemical odor suppression design at Meridian Sound was sophisticated enough that routine exterior air quality monitoring, the kind used around known drug manufacturing locations, would not have flagged the building. Investigators have stated that if the postal manifest anomaly had not generated the investigation, the facility could plausibly have continued operating for additional months or longer without detection. $4.2 million in cash, 38 kilograms of fentanyl powder, a custom HVAC installation specifically engineered to evade external chemical detection. These are not the hallmarks of an improvised operation. This was a business, structured and maintained with the same attention to continuity that any legitimate enterprise would apply to its own vulnerabilities. The network that Meridian Sound serviced in Memphis, Louisville, and Atlanta is partially dismantled. 14 individuals are facing federal charges. Several tons of pressing capacity have been removed from operation. The supply contact in the Southwest remains at large. The upstream source of precursor materials has not been publicly identified. There's a line in the ATF supplemental filing that reads almost like something out of a procedural drama. It describes the moment agents opened the equipment closet door and found the hydraulic press. It notes that the machine was still warm. Someone had been using it within the previous 12 hours, 400,000 pills a week, for at least 14 months. The math on what that represents in terms of product distributed across the Mid-South doesn't need elaboration. The network is dismantled. The demand it served still exists. The supply chain above Nashville has not been fully traced. Somewhere in the public charging documents, in a footnote about the Southwest contact, is an open case number. That case is still active. If you want to understand how federal investigations like this one develop, and what comes next in cases where the supply chain remains partially intact, subscribe so you don't miss the follow-up when those proceedings move forward. This isn't the end of the story. And somewhere in Birmingham, at a truck stop on I-20, Darius Wynn sat in the back of a federal vehicle while agents documented his phone and his travel records. He didn't say anything on the ride back to Nashville. The agents noted that in their logs. He had been in the music industry long enough to know that anything said in that vehicle would be recorded. The studio on Gallatin Avenue was still taped off when the sun came up over East Nashville. Evidence technicians were still working the second floor. The Instagram account was still active. 180,000 followers, none of whom knew what had been happening 2 floors above the mixing console. A drug network capable of producing 400,000 fentanyl pills per week doesn't require a warehouse district or a remote industrial property. It requires a door that locks, a custom ventilation system, and a cover story that holds up under casual inspection. Meridian Sound held up for 14 months. Comment YES or NO. Do you think operations like this one are still running in your city right now? The evidence bags filled 3 DEA vehicles. The cash drums took 4 agents to carry down the stairs. The hydraulic press required a freight dolly. By 9 a.m., the building had been stripped of everything relevant to the investigation. What remained was an empty recording studio with modified walls, a custom HVAC installation, and a Spotify page with 2 credited productions from 2025. The artists whose sessions were recorded there have not been charged. They didn't know. That's what investigators concluded after reviewing communications and interview records. The studio was a real recording facility. Real music was made there. That's what made it work. One of the couriers, according to a pretrial filing, told investigators that he had been moving product for 8 months before he fully understood what was inside the cases. He had believed it was something, but not what it turned out to be. His cooperation with investigators is noted in the record. His exposure under the conspiracy charge remains the same regardless. The law doesn't grade on belief. It grades on action and knowledge. That's the framework. Whether it produces just outcomes in every case is a separate question that federal courts are not designed to resolve quickly. The 2,200 hours of wiretap recordings are in evidence. The signal account metadata analysis is in evidence. The shipment manifests going back to September 2025 are in evidence. 14 people have lawyers. 1 person hasn't been found. What started with a postal inspector and a weight discrepancy on an audio cable manifest ended, at least in its Nashville chapter, with a hydraulic press still warm at 2:07 a.m. on a Thursday morning in East Nashville. The case file is in federal court. The supply chain is not.